Hello, my name is Seth Amundsen, and I'm here to talk to you all today about the traditional method of bottling champagne. Champagne has been in production for approximately 1,200 years, and up until about the 1800s, it was a still wine, murky and overly sweet. Now, a still wine is a wine without any bubbles in it. And I know what you're thinking. Champagne without any bubbles? You've got to be joking. But it's true. For about the first 1,000 years of champagne production, there were no bubbles in it. In fact, those bubbles were largely regarded as an error, a mistake, or a flaw in the production process. And it wasn't even until this wine began being shipped to England that it was regarded as a bit of a happy mistake. Now today, champagne and the whole market for it is based on those tiny little bubbles. So I ask you, what happened? How did champagne go from one extreme to the other? It's called the champagne method. It's a method of bottling champagne such that it isolates the desirable byproducts of a secondary fermentation whilst removing the undesirable byproducts, retaining the carbonation while removing the sediment. So, let's talk for a moment about what fermentation really is. So when you ferment something, like a wine, you press your grapes and they flow into something like a carboy, and the yeast which naturally occurs in that wine begins to eat, or naturally occurs in that juice, begins to eat up all the sugars, converting them to various types of alcohols, carbon dioxide, and a whole plethora of other chemicals. Once all that sugar has been eaten up, the yeast cells die and become the sediment, the murkiness in the champagne. One way to filter them out, filter all that gunk out, is to allow the sediment to trickle down to the bottom over time, and then siphon from the top, separating out the good clean wine from the murky stuff at the bottom. Then, once the wine has been separated from the sediment, it's bottled, and in the case of champagne, undergoes a second fermentation, meaning that a little extra sugar is put in the bottle with that wine. And then it's capped. This creates a secondary fermentation process, which is one of the defining qualities of champagne, which helps differentiate it from all other types of wine. So, in here we have champagne, sugar, and all of the wine and everything like that that goes into it. And it's aged on a lie, which is what this piece of wood is called, for 15 months as determined by French law. After 15 months, it undergoes riddling. Riddling is a 10-day process where the wine is increased in tilt until almost standing straight up and down, and each day it's given a sharp quarter turn, thus encouraging the yeast to settle further and further and further into the neck of the bottle. After the riddling process comes disgorgement. Disgorgement is where you take the wine very carefully and you put it in a bucket of rock salt and ice. This thus freezes the sediment in the neck of the bottle. Once it's frozen, they flip it over and pop the top. The secondary fermentation process produces a bunch of carbon dioxide, which pressurizes the bottle. Once that top is popped, the pressure launches that frozen brick of sediment out like a mortar. The next step is called dosage. Dosage is where they fill up the wine a little bit, allowing to top it off with a solution, oftentimes honey, sugar water, champagne, or possibly even cognac. Once it's been dosed up to the top, it's corked and capped and caged and ready to be enjoyed. So you see, the champagne method has taken this murky, chewy, still wine and transformed it into something unique, lively, and bubbly. It has ushered in an era of what's considered modern champagne. So much so that I bet none of you would even recognize champagne without the bubbles in it. With that, I'd like to say thank you for your time. It's been a pleasure to have you.
Very good.